And we're live. How you doing, guys? Here we are in the old timey store, and it's just an illusion. Everything is an illusion. You're the only thing that can make it real. By serving God's unconditional love through Jesus' unconditional forgiveness. So I was reading End of Times part of the Bible, and I think that's such a. It has nothing to do with the Old Testament, New Testament. Just like it's like tacked on there, right? It's very similar to the Islamic Quran. And that whole book is basically the Old Testament, New Testament, and then there's about 16 pages stuck on it. Right? And Old Testament, God's constantly talking about the Messiah, right? Jesus, right? He's constantly giving everyone the heads up. Of course, everyone ignores what God says, does whatever the heck they want. He keeps saying, "Hey, stop being a bitch. Don't be a harlot. Come on." And I love you, and don't worry about what you did yesterday. Just keep doing better tomorrow, and no one does, and so that's why we have all these apocalypse. The flood, Noah, is Israel being blown up about 9 times, and there's a 70-year period between each of those where God keeps saying, come on, do better, stop doing this stupid stuff, stop having false idols. And basically, the biggest false idol that's in there is when we think we're God. It's, when we, put everything to have that Tesla car, right, that $100,000 car, when you go buy yourself a nice, good Peter for $3,000 and it'll get you around. And if you had any kind of sense, you did what I did with my buddies in 1968. We went to a junkyard and we found all these Coca-Cola back in the day when Coca-Cola was delivered to restaurants in stainless steel tanks, and they recycled them. And they were about a yard wide, about this thing, and it had the syrup in it, right? And it had two disconnects, pressure disconnects, and it had a O-ring kind of thing that they put the syrup in, and then they knock it off, and it would hold the pressure. So we, in our cars, we basically welded that tank like that on the side of the inside of where the engine is. Back in the day, car engines were teeny weeny things, and under the hood was like you could live underneath there. I had a Ford F-250, 1967, and this thing was 57. And the motor was like a slant, a straight 6, and it took no space. So we had all the space to stick this tank in there and hook it up to the alternator and put water in that tank. And then we put 2 pressure hoses into the head of the carburetor, and it would inject a spurt of hydrogen and oxygen into the carburetor, mix it with gasoline. And my truck, before we did this, got maybe, 10 miles to the gallon, if that, maybe 3. But once we did that, we didn't do anything else to that engine. We just did that. Got 170 miles to the gallon of gas. Gas at that time was costing 16 cents, no big deal. But it was the first year, when we did that, it was the first year that New York State was testing for what came out of your tailpipe. And my buddy, who we did this in his garage, he was a mechanic, we took it to one of his buddies that had one of those. He just got that machine, and he stuck the sensor in the tailpipe. The guy, I don't understand this, this is a brand new thing. Maybe I don't know how to use it, but it says the only thing coming out of your tailpipe is water. That's vapor. So we had done that, and so we, we're part of this thing called alternative technology at the United. Well, first at Cooper Union. I mean, that was what we did for a project. We were a working group, and so Uh, so, and that was something we did in less than 2 days. We were up, we put off this project, put it off, and we said, no, we have to. And this in the middle of Vietnam. Well, I was 16. I was going to high school, even though I was in college. I was going to high school, so they weren't going to quite draft me yet. But the boys, if they flunked out of that school, Cooper Union, they would have gone on to Vietnam. So we did that the weekend. Friday, we finished it. Saturday night, Sunday, and then Monday we showed it to our teacher. And everybody else had like dioramas made out of popsicle sticks. And we sat there and said, "Okay, you chocolates, what you got next?" And we said, "Oh, after class, our project is down in the parking lot." I said, "Okay, everyone go." We went down there. We put him in a car, and we said, "Here, take this stick and see how much look. See, the gas gauge says below empty, right? Okay, put a stick in there and make sure there's no gasoline in that tank." Okay. So we drove all the way to Connecticut to a lobster shop, had dinner, came back. Right? We didn't even put anything in. It was below E. It was still there. I said, "Okay." He looked under the thing. He saw what we did. He said, "Very good, boys. I knew you guys would have it." And so you all get A's with stars, right? You're the top of my class, right? You always are. You're always number one in my heart. Because everyone else had black pants, white shirts, black ties. They're all engineers. Us, we were back there in t-shirts and kicks, and whatever we were wearing, and smoking pot back there, right? So, and this was back in the day when people didn't know what it smelled like, and everyone smoked. So it wasn't like so. Anyway, so our teacher goes, "So boys, what are you going to do with this?" And so, "Well, we're going to patent it, and then, take it to Detroit and blah blah. And we understood what burning all fossil fuels were going to do to the planet, and it'll save the world." He goes, "Nice idea." He goes, "You think you?" He goes, "So when did you start doing this?" Friday, you had like an ounce of pot, a couple of six packs, and by Saturday, you had it all done, right? He says, "You think you guys are first chuckleheads who?" He said, "No, a lot of people have done this before." And we were like the Nikola Tesla Club. We already knew about induction and da 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 da. Wardenclyffe's. And so he said, "No, boys, what you're going to do is take this out of your car and destroy it and never tell anyone about it, because all the people who do stuff like that, they disappear." He goes, "Now you boys, you're on somebody's list. That's why you're all here. You're all poor. You're all, but you guys are the best in my class. You're the best in that school and in that department. We all talk about you guys. You keep coming up. Like, we invented the digital electric meter back in 1970 because Cooper Union owned all these houses, these brownstones on 10th Street, from the east side to the west side, and we put, instead of the pinwheel, we were, because NASA and JPL and other people were already fooling around with wind power. They were all looking at it, and and there's different levels of wind, right? Like the wind way up in the air, this thing is going like a jet engine, but it doesn't have the density. The closer you get to Earth, the denser the air is. There's more load there, right? Like you're getting a jet plane and you head towards California from New York. It takes like 8 hours, right? And then you do what you're going to do. You get on the airplane, and that jet takes 2.5 hours to get home. Why? Because when you're flying to California, you're going into the jet stream and you're pushing against that wind, right? And it was going like 120 miles an hour, very thin, right? Close to the ground, there's a lot of load there. There's a lot of horsepower, right? And so our wind generator was a barrel because we did our research. We went and saw what the Dutch did. They didn't just have the sails up there and the pinwheel. No, that was old school. What they had were these barrels that were about 20 feet high and a diameter about 60 feet, and it had vanes all the way around it. When the wind would really blow and blow it faster than it mechanically could stand, the vanes would pull themselves in and the wind would go around the barrel, right? So that's what we did. We just copied their thing and we made small ones so they could carry a heavier load and because there was less friction, less um, force on the surface of it, right? So we could have, a polyphase um, alternating. Well, we actually had DC generators, but we had alternating current, changing the DC into AC, an alternator. So anyway, we and jacked up the frequency and the voltage, right? And so we made enough juice on that street to power all those houses and 1,000 more, right? And so we were dumping it back into the grid, right? And then the utility company said, "Oh, what are you doing? Your electric bill is like the meter's going backwards, Because you can't touch our grid, blah blah blah. It's sacrosanct. You can't do this." And then Con Ed came and we negotiated, and they said, "Okay, if you're only going to do this, and you can just put it in the IEEE magazine, and that's all you're going to do. I mean, we've done stuff like this, so yeah, no problem. It's good boys, come work for us later, right? We can all build nuclear power plants." So we did that, and we did a whole bunch more. And at a certain point, we were just being a bit too much off the hook. Everyone at the IEEE was seeing what we were doing. People in the United Nations were seeing what we were doing. People at the banks were seeing what we were doing. The oil companies, the Seven Sisters were seeing what we were doing. And basically, it was like being a football star in college. These guys, I was like not even out of high school. And these guys, well, you should come work. We know Grandpa Stahl. We know they knew my pedigree, That's how I got to go to school for 30 years. So they paid me to go to school, Now, I was a scholar. That's what they said. You're not matriculating. You're a scholar. Every time I go to a university, I'd be doing something. I wouldn't be taking classes. Sometimes I taught. I mean, I would sit in on lectures. There were professors who were like my mentors. And yeah, I didn't go. Sometimes I went to their class because they wanted me to challenge their stupid students. But anyway, that's how things can work. But the status quo is doing everything they can to push the human race off a cliff, right? All of these wars, they should not exist, Right. That's a nice little tremor. So I take this, I don't anymore, but it does, connect me to the internet. I can record stuff and blah, 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 right? So I'm just going to kind of thumb through
The number of countries due to take part in these hearings reflects growing international scrutiny of what's happening in the occupied territories. Advisory opinions aren't legally binding, but the hearings could have an impact on and provide an insight into global allegiances that may influence future peace negotiations.
The widow of the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny will honor her husband today in a speech to the European Union foreign ministers in Brussels.
So, what I was saying about the World Criminal Court and the World Justice Court, both those courts are like the main courts of the United Nations. It's supposed to be the muscle behind the Security Council, right? Well, South Africa brought Israel to the, civil rights, or not civil rights, but the human, not too much the criminal court. That's coming next. And the court didn't want to just flat out say, yes, these guys are killing everyone. This is, they're Nazis. They didn't want to say that. So they said that all the evidence that you've given us so far leans us into the position to say that there is a genocide going on here. But we're going to investigate it more, and we're going to have other people come and talk to them, blah, blah, blah. And Israel, you're on notice. Stop doing this. They haven't stopped doing it. And they had to go to the UN court on the 15th of February and basically say how they were doing. And they didn't show up, right? They were being Donald Trump. And so bottom line is, even if that court comes out and says, yeah, you are doing genocide, stop it. And the thing is that the United States is complicit. So when they bring that notification to be, stamped by the council there, America will just block it. And that'll be that. So, at what point, all the bombs falling on, killing all these people are American bombs, right? And we've been giving it to Israel to do it, right? We, just, in early part of February, when the Congress wouldn't give them any money, Biden gave them like 12 or 120 million dollars worth of, those 2-ton bombs that are made out of hard iron that just blow up and tear everything up within a quarter mile. If you're in your house, you're dead. And so does that make us complicit? Are we war criminals here in America? And we're all the colleges, when good old Ike made that speech about the military-industrial complex, the thing he left out was the bankers and the colleges. I mean, he mentioned them in the churches. He said that this has an affliction to them. But you see, these universities were supposed to, I spent 30 years in universities, and it was all about finding truth and blah, 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 right? Not so much, right? So you come out, trying to say, hey, what about the Palestinians? Zing, you are taken away, right? So this is the world that we've been living in. It hasn't been, So anyway, anybody watching? Nobody's watching. How long have we been going on? 17 minutes. Come on. As Johnny Boy would say. Johnny's got so many creatures and characters locked up in him. I mean, that's why he would definitely, and he's too scared to go to, he's going to Hollywood. He was in Hollywood 2 months. What did he do? Goose egg. He colored his hair and he stopped up 2 septic systems.
But why don't we split it up? I'll take the people and you take the stuff. How does that sound, Abram? Abram says, absolutely not. He accepts nothing. And then turns to this mysterious man, the Melchizedek, king of righteousness. He's the king of Salem or Jerusalem, king of peace.
King of peace.
He doesn't want anything to do with the king of Sodom, and yet he pays tribute to this man Melchizedek. I think he's showing us several things. Here would be the foremost: that the blessings of God may come through the world, but they must not entangle us with the world. Because I think a fair question to ask is this: why is Abram willing to accept the wealth of Pharaoh in chapter 12, but not willing to accept all that he has rightfully earned here in chapter 14? Could it be he wants nothing to do with Sodom in any way, which I think is true? He looks at the king of Sodom. I don't want anything. I don't want the people. I don't want a shoelace. I don't want a crumb. I want nothing.
And so, the last 15 years of my life, I was, from 1997 to 2014, I worked in the corporate world. But before then, from 88 till 97, I was still working in corporate world, but I was in universities. I was an itinerant scholar, right? But all those universities were being, paid for, Georgetown, Cornell, Stanford, IBM, Xerox Park. I would say scholar in all those places. And I was more about language, not code, but syntax, right? Meaning, intent. That's what I was studying. And the dynamics connected to technology. Because I'm a technologist, I'm a futurist. I've been playing around with that stuff since I was born in 1950 when I first electrocuted my mother. Right? First thing I ever did. I wasn't even 1 year old. I got out of the crib, crawled across the floor, found a butter knife. I have no idea where I found that. Under the couch, probably. And stuck it in the outlet, right? And in your outlet, you got the big thing and then the smaller one and then the U ground, right? And I stuck it into the little one. And that butter knife just went right in there. And I was in my little onesie. I wasn't grounded. I was on the nice carpet and I was just getting a nice little tingle. And the electricity was talking to me. And my sister ratted me out. And I was plucky bum bum because she said I was spitting sparks out of my mouth. And, my mother ran in to get me out and she put one hand on the radiator, to like lean down and like pull me out of the electric socket. And she was in the circuit, right? She was grounded on one hand and touching me. That was the energized. Shot across the living room, smashed into her nice new coffee table and broke her arm. And then they put me in a crib and turned it on upside down to me like it was jail. It wasn't too tough. It was all geometry. I kind of leaned onto the top. I could turn it over and then go. So that's why she turned me over to my grandma. Just, put me in my grandpa's sanctus place. He was a barber surgeon. He had every kind of, between the 1890s and 1920s when he was J.P. Morgan's barber, the Waldorf Astoria, and he had the big fancy barbershop in Freeport, where all the movie stars were, because they didn't. All the movies in the 20s and earlier before that were made in Long Island and New York. All theater, right, Broadway, vaudeville was all in New York. Anyway, so he had all these gizmos, all these electrical things, vibrators, sparky things that's put, and they had a lot. They're now starting to lean into that technology, right? Before they used to call it snake oil salesman. Oh. Surgeons used to be thought of like carpenters. They just saw up a limb here and sew it up. The doctors were the guys who smelled your shit and told you what was wrong with you through looking through the chicken gizzards. And they still are. They are practicing. That's all they're practicing on you. So.
We can't let petty, partisan, angry politics get in the way of our responsibilities as a great nation. We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win. I refuse to let that happen. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. The United States of America.
If you don't think that's, Joe Biden, they got a wire in his head. He's just blabbing it off. There is no difference between Donnie Trump and Biden. I mean, Donnie goes on and on and on how unhinged Donnie is, but he is. But listen to Donnie's. Biden, JoJo, whatever he is, the used car salesman. And so Donnie, you listen to his speeches; they're as unhinged. All he goes is on and on about himself. Good luck with that. And if you go read all the stuff, go read Mein Kampf. And there was two of them, 1 and 2, right? And Adolf didn't write that stuff. It was written, and he, as the poster boy, said, "See, I wrote this. This is what I'm going to do," right? And the same thing with Donnie. He's not. This ain't none of this coming out of his head. He is just the poster boy. and so is JoJo. And there is no difference between the two. When after the election, what's going to happen? We're going to have martial law, whatever it is. It's going to be that, right? And it'll be the kind of martial law that existed in that movie V for Vendetta, right? Everyone could go to the pub. They had plenty of Twinkies to eat, but there was no real freedom of thought. Right? Now, guys like me, I will be swept up and be given the choice. You're a really smart guy. You've done all this work for us before. You ready to go to work for us again? And I say, I am. Right? You used to pay me like 20 grand a week, and I only had to work 5 to 10 weeks a year to make what I needed. Well, this year, no, you're going to pay me a lot more, and you're going to do like before. Give me my sway, meaning I can do whatever I want, however I want to do it. And I will get you the positive outcome you want, even though you may not like what's happening in the process, but you will get your outcome. And everyone else will survive. You won't be killing 3/4 of the world's population because you don't really have to or need to. And in the bottom line, it'll be better because we already got people out beyond the stars. So we got to start pop. I mean, how did America be so successful as a country? It's because we let immigrants in. We constantly had a new flow. Otherwise, we'd have nobody here. All those rich white people, they don't have kids. They're they're reptiles. They pop out an egg or two, just like the Queen of England. She popped out. What's his name? He's king now, but why is he always ending up in the hospital? Because his genetically enhanced skin can't cover those scaly scale reptile presence that he has. I mean, just go read David Icke. David Icke, he's all over that. I love David. David is truly, truly beautiful person, and he does his best, right? And he wasn't, came from a kind of, wrong side of the tracks. He was a kid who played soccer. He played soccer. He wasn't a superstar, but he was good. He got hurt. He was a presenter. He was charming. He was good looking. He looked good on TV. So he was a soccer presenter. And then he went off to a festival in Brazil, and he kind of bumped into a bunch of shaman who took him out into the Amazon and blew some, oski up his nose, and he met all the aliens. And I had a same experience. When I was in Buzios, which was the Nazis have places called Hail Hydra. They're not real Nazis. They're worse. Go watch Captain America. Yes, the Hail Hydra were Nazis, but they were worse. So Hail Hydra. Let's see what else we got on the magic box here.
And there is nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. My fellow Americans, thank you for your time.
There's JoJo again.
May God bless you all. May God protect our troops.
Oh, yeah.
All right, this is live special coverage from NPR News. We just heard from President Biden, who delivered only his second primetime speech from the Oval Office during his presidency. He asked for more funding for foreign policy goals, chiefly for the wars in Israel and Ukraine. Speaking about Hamas and Russia, President Biden said, quote, "They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy." Biden also stated that when terrorists don't pay a price, they cause more chaos and destruction.
And of course, it's the French psychologist Lacan, his number one thing, Freud said everything is sex. Lacan said, when you say something, what your problem is, you're talking about yourself. So everything that JoJo, that he just said, that, Russia and Hamas, they're terrible, they're worse than Nazis, they're going after democracies. Well, I'm sorry to say that Israel and Ukraine aren't democracies. Sorry. So do your homework. Go see what both those countries have been in the last 20 years, since the year 2000. Right? And everything is kind of right in front of our face. Nothing's really, there's no, I've been writing a lot about our founding fathers, and our country wasn't based on Christianity. It's based on, in God we trust. It's not Jesus, It is their Machiavellian Masonic God ball, right? So go do your homework. Go study the secret societies. In the United States, there's one gigantic, big occult entity, business plan, corporation, right? Go look up Albert Pike. See what he was doing, right? Look up the Knights Templars, So, and our media so these.
I'm Elsa Chang, and we're going to continue our live special coverage now with NPR White House correspondent Asma Khalid, National Security correspondent Greg Myrie, Tom Bowman, who covers the Pentagon, and NPR National Political correspondent Mara Liasson. Welcome back to all four of you.
Good to be here.
Hey, Elsa. All right, Asma, back to you again. What stood out to you? Like, how much do you think this will realistically move the needle on President Biden's foreign policy goals?
Well, you heard him make this pitch that the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in Israel are related, where he made this point saying that they both are fundamentally about neighbors who are trying to annihilate these democratic countries. And look, Elsa, I think this is an important link that he's trying to establish, because not just for the American public, but he is going to Congress and asking for billions and billions of dollars more, potentially, that will link both the fight in Ukraine and the fight in Israel. And that is important because there are a number of Republican lawmakers who have been expressing.
So why aren't we asking for a ceasefire in both those places? Because the Ukrainians have lost 200,000 people, give or take. Same with Russia; they have lost quite a few too. Right? About the same. Close to 750,000 people have died in the Ukraine war. And another 750,000 have been, mortally wounded, meaning they're not going to be walking around. They're not going to be able to see or hear or talk or use their hands because they lost them, picking up a grenade or getting hit by, artillery shells, so these wars, and we're not even talking about what's going on in Darfur or Sierra Leone. Those wars are even worse. Sierra Leone, in the Strip, they have 2 million people roaming around. Sierra Leone, they got 8 million. In the Strip, 40,000 people probably have died so far. In Sierra Leone, it's almost 1 million, and they started doing this in August or July, or I don't think, but late or middle 2023, and that's just one place. There are lots of other. Ethiopia. I could go on and on and on about all the wars that are going on, and they're all scripted. All the scholastics who call me up and want to debate me over the phone, and I record them because they're hilarious. Because once they paint themselves in a corner, and then I kind of press on what they've said, they scream at me that I'm stupid, I'm crazy, you don't know what you're talking about. Click. And so, that's my little Freudenscheid, cheeky monkey side. I just love getting them into that place and then letting them eat their lunch, So, but the world is not, first of all, the world isn't any worse off than it ever has been. And, I went and worked for the corporations between 98 and 2014 because I thought the world I was involved and had access to information to make me think, I don't think humanity can last another day. So I might as well go work for these total hedonist guys and have a good time, which I did. Well, when I tell my churchy friends all the stuff I did and show them the pictures, when I showed them a picture of my girlfriend who was and this is why I know about Ukrainian, she was Ukrainian, and she was a mobster. Like, she ran a number of brothels, escort services, and titty bars in Florida. And how I stumbled into her was I met this guy in an electric supply store, and he, it's a nice Jewish boy, looks like an accountant, and he's looking at electric parts going, and I go, so what's your problem? He goes, well, I got these motels and they're all falling apart, and the electric systems don't work, and people are getting electrocuted, and some of the buildings are burning down, and I have a Vic to cover. And I look at him, Vic? I said, what are you, mobster? He goes, well, my father was, and he died and left me and my brothers everything, and we're accountants, we don't know anything about anything. So I said, oh, I got nothing to do. Why don't you show me? So he owned all of these from Jensen Beach on the East Coast all the way down to Miami. He had about 12 to 20 of these 1950s hotels that had a titty bar in the parking lot of the thing. Instead of having an IHOP, it had a titty bar. And the rest was history. And he owned down in Miami, just a little south of South Beach. He had these where the intercoastal ends, and all of these like 12 to 20 story condos. And that one that fell down a couple of years ago, it was like near there. And these things were built like the worst standards, and the electrics were like beyond ridiculous. And they were milking these people, and so nothing worked, and they were paying 20 grand a month for community services, and the place was falling. Anyway, so he got me to fix all this stuff up. And this woman, she was about 28. Her name was Katz, and she was like a hellhound, but the sweetest. She knew like 10 languages. She had been a banker in Ukraine, and so she had obfuscated with some cash. It came down and basically took over this guy's thing. And then the mob, who had already been, with this guy's father, they almost came to blows. And then they realized, no, we're scared of this lady. She will be good on our side. So we'll let her into the council. We'll let her into the high table. We'll let her run this, and we'll just take our cut. And she'll give it to us because she's a smart businesswoman. Why go to all the effort to go to war, lose a lot of assets, when we can just sit back and let her run everything? We're not we're misogynists, but when we see a professional like her, Anyway, so I started fixing stuff around, and I got this titty bar that was like her kingdom, working really good and making it look. I mean, it was a shithole, place. I made everything look like Las Vegas, and she goes, "How'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, a little this, a little that." And she goes, "Wow, you're pretty smart." And she goes, "What books are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, I'm reading Tolstoy." And she goes, "Reading Tolstoy? Do you like Russian?" I said, "Well, I like the Russian culture, but and I knew she was Ukrainian. I really like the Ukrainian culture because they're always right, and they take the best of it and choose." And so we just got deeper and deeper into it. And all these, like my girlfriend now, she loves me because I don't bother her. I don't call her. Honey, what are you doing? I don't have a car except when people lend me one. And she comes. She knows that I'm always in the deep green. I'm not that far from her restaurant. And so when she feels that itch, she comes over and gets me. And then we go out. We go into the big city, and where there's always good music, good lectures, good art shows. And she is that kind of girl, but she's let that slide for about 20 years, right? And I don't know how long this is going to last because I'm awakening her aesthetic side, and she's reading more books, where she wouldn't read any books. She's just eating cheese puffs and watching television, but mostly work. She works from like 6 in the morning till 7 at night. she has 2 days off. So anyway, and I'm a churchy boy too. I met her in church, and she's so she's a big girl, but she's always dressed to the nines, and I rub her feet in such a way that she just melts. So anyway, for the time being, we're having a perfect relationship. Now, out here, I'm surrounded by these colleges, and I just go hang out in them and find interesting women. And so the 20 years I've been here, I've probably had 15 nice relationships, and women who I had relationships with that are still in the neighborhood are still my buds. They got married or didn't get married or did this or decided that they were really guys or lesbians. And this one girl said, "Oh, you're the best lesbian I've ever had." So I never have a problem with, and when I tell John about this, he loses, "That's fornication." No, fornication, God is all about us. You read the beginning of the Bible, go on and multiply, have a good time. He says that, have a good time. That's why the end thing, the apocalypse part of the Bible, that's an anthem. It's not the word of God. It's some guy who wrote that in the 4th century, not even close to Jesus. And it was like the comic books of the time. Other people were writing things of that nature. And his got, popularized. He was a bohemian. He was up there in one of those Christian cult, like the Greek Orthodox. Not to say that they're a cult, but pretty much all religions are a cult. And God said himself, have no false idols. That's what religions are, false idols. The thing is to have a personal relationship. The Old Testament goes on and on and on and on and on and on about a personal relationship. And then Jesus, doubled down to, because he comes to the Hebrews and say, look, you've been going, God's been talking about having a relationship with the Messiah, and here I am. I come to you in person. It's no longer on television. Hey. And they killed him. So. And you guys are having too much fun. So still, no one's watching. So how much juice do I have? Well, you know what? I'm gonna bail right now. I have things to do. Let's see. Yeah. I have things to do. So I'm going to come back in about an hour or a little more, and we can carry on. If you watch this now, come look for me in about an hour and a half. Around, it's now about 3-ish. I'll probably be 4:30-ish. Okay? Okay.